Hey, what's up folks, Jambook Reviews here, and today I'll be reviewing In This Corner of the World by Fumiyo Kōno. Fumiyo Kōno is a manga creator from Nishiku in Hiroshima Prefecture. She made her commercial debut in 1995 with the manga Street Corner Tidings of Flowers. Since then, she has created several series including Mr. Coco, A Long Road, and For Sanpei. Her most famous works are the two that focused on World War II era Japan. The first one, Town of Evening Calm, Country of Cherry Blossoms, won the grand prize at the Japan Media Arts Festival in 2004, and also a Tezuka Creative Award in 2005. The second series, In This Corner of the World, won the Excellence Prize at the Media Arts Festival in 2008, and it has sold over 1 million copies as of 2018. First, a quick overview of the book. In This Corner of the World was originally collected as 3 volumes in Japan, but 7 Seas opted to release the English version as a single softcover omnibus. It has a nice build and cover design with a few color pages inside. The main flaw, in my opinion, was putting footnotes in the margins of the book instead of endnotes at the back, which would have been easier to read. Now let's talk about the art. Fumiyo Kōno has a very classical style with simply drawn yet expressive characters. Her influences include Tezuka, Shirato, Fujiko Fujio, and Yu Takita. The most notable artistic flourish in her work is the use of cross-hatching, especially for the natural and man-made environment. So we get some really cool pieces like this old building here. Another notable technique is the use of silent 6 to 9 panel grids to depict the day-to-day activities of the characters, a layout I've seen more often in Western comics than in modern manga. Last but not least is the use of a simplified version of her style to depict the drawings done by her main character, and there were subtle, deliberate changes to it as the story progressed, so lots of interesting visuals in there. Now let's dive into the narrative. The story begins in the early 1930s in Hiroshima and focuses on our main character Suzu, who lives there with her parents and siblings. It is a somewhat idyllic country life as her main problems are school and an aggressive older brother. Suzu is a spacey type of character with a tendency to daydream and also draw frequently, and the author used that to incorporate an element of magical realism into the story. Suzu's life begins to change drastically in the 1940s when the war starts. 2 important people in her life head off to join the armed forces, and a man named Shusaku comes to her village to marry her. Not an odd occurrence, as in those days arranged marriages were the norm in Japan. So in 1944 they get hitched, and the young bride moves to Kure City where Shusaku's family lives, and this is where the bulk of the story takes place. Even though she's a bit uncomfortable, Suzu tries her best to adjust to her new life and home. Her father-in-law is always working and her mother-in-law is temporarily disabled, so she has to do most of the work around the house herself. Her sister-in-law is having personal problems, and because of that she isn't too fond of Suzu, in contrast to her daughter, who is happy to have a new aunt to play with. Last but not least, her husband is standoffish, and Suzu is unsure whether he really loves her or it was just a marriage of convenience. All this while the war looms heavily in the background. So it's an interesting plot for a manga. Fumiyo Kōno skillfully recreated a war-torn era, but focused on the mundane rather than the shocking. The story gave life to a broad cross-section of characters that, to me, flowed naturally in and out of Suzu's life, even though there was a sense of transience to their interactions. The thing that stood out to me the most was the upbeat way in which the story was told. No matter how difficult the times became, the characters maintained their optimism, and I think that's part of what the creator wanted to depict. How the civilians, somewhat removed from the horrors of the war, lived their day-to-day lives. It's not completely divorced from reality either, because many of the Japanese citizens were kept misinformed about the full ramifications of what was happening on the battlefield, while at the same time being active participants in the war effort. The reader is kept updated through footnotes and such, but there was a general obliviousness among the characters. A perfect example is the scene where Suzu and her niece were outside when a sudden air raid occurs. Her father-in-law, on his way home from work, rushes in and helps them to take cover. Afterwards, the girls find him prostrate on the ground as if he's dead, but in the next panel we learn that he actually fell asleep from overwork. So, it's played for laughs. The footnote then informs us that in reality, over 60 soldiers and almost 30 civilians were killed in that particular raid. There's that delicacy when dealing with a heavy subject. This style of writing runs counter to the sense of foreboding that usually permeates stories like this, so when the bad things do eventually happen, the impact is all the more devastating. I can't really think of any major issues I had with the story that can't be chalked up to the creator trying to depict the times accurately. Some things were left unanswered, like Suzu's age and what really happened to some of the characters, but it all felt deliberate in the end. So yeah, In This Corner of the World is a solid World War II manga, filled with pathos and humor, and you can learn a lot about that era of Japan while still being entertained. On a final note, there is something I would like to see in the future. Stories like In This Corner of the World and Grave of the Fireflies did a great job of portraying the civilian perspective of the war. Shigeru Mizuki's manga did a great job of portraying the perspective of the soldiers on the front line. The missing perspective is that of the orchestrators of the war, those who were fully conscious of and invested in what was being done, the generals and such. I'm sure we are all aware that it is still a touchy subject in Japan, but to paraphrase Fumiyo Kōno, war is a complicated topic, but it's better if more people talk about it. The more voices we listen to, the more diverse and understanding we can have. Thanks for watching. Until next time.